Welcome back to Reynolds Runabouts, everybody. I'm Jeffrey Reynolds. In this episode, I'm going to show the application of the sealer and varnish over the total boat high-performance epoxy that I put on the parts and then on the interior longitudal members of the bottom of the boat. I'll also include the painting of the two floor panels that sit in the stern of the boat that hold the battery and the fuel tank, as well as the bilge area where you walk and where the water will go and hopefully drain. I've also repainted that and gave the interior a very much needed redo, and it looks just beautiful with the gleaming varnish and the gleaming paint. I'm really happy with how that all turned out. So let's get to work. I am now ready to put my first coat of varnish on my interior parts. Each part has 3 coats of sealer over the 3 coats of epoxy, and they've been lightly sanded over the sealer. You do not want to break back into that epoxy. I believe that there's a connection made between the sealer over the epoxy, which allows you to use varnish. I'm not a chemist, but everyone's recommending that we do that. So I've got my varnish in my filter. As I'm getting closer to the bottom of my can, I'm finding that I have more and more skin or thickness, and it's important to make sure that goes through a filter. So on the boat, I've been using the brush because of the grain. I'm brushing against the grain and then smoothing off with a tip because it has a lot of grain. This, I've eliminated that because now I have gone ahead and filled that grain with the epoxy and then followed it up with the the sealer, which it gives its own little building properties too. So now we've got a really beautiful surface to work on, and I can use my foam roller. And what I do is I use tin foil in my pan just so I don't have to buy a bunch of pans and throw them away. You can just throw the tin foil away. Roll it up there, and I'll start, maybe I'll even start high and go down. And I've tacked this, vacuum tacked, and then turned on the video. And even though I can't get down in that corner, I got a lot of it with the roller. My brush has already got some varnish in it. You want to make sure it has something in it. Don't go into it dry. Got my corner taken care of, and while I'm here, I'm just going to bring it out because the roller's not going to get in there. I might even do a cross grain here just to make sure I got it, and then I'll bring it out. And then I'll tip back into this from right to left. This is a great place to do your break because you've got a corner on the inside. You can really make a nice transition and not see a lot of lines. I'm just going to make sure I don't get any holidays or miss any spots there. Again, the varnish, you're just trying to bring out the bubble. As it comes to the surface, it's going to want to bubble and let the solvents dissolve. So I can go on cross grain with the roller, where you can. You're just trying to get it on the surface. Maybe go back. Just want to make sure you want to get it worked in. And then I'm going to, remember I drew it out like this. I'll draw it out a little farther because otherwise my tipping will end up hitting this vertical piece, adding a brush mark. So now I've got it out far enough where I can go this way. So then I'll tip back right to left to get the bubbles. And then I'll maybe catch this edge in case you get a drip down in there. You can get that last if you like as well. Again, put it on crossways, down the edges. Make sure you get back that way, and then you can just follow up with a tip. There you go, like that. You know, and this is where you're going to put paint on the, or varnish on the edge. You want to make sure you go back over there and grab that. Otherwise you'll have drips. And what they'll do, they'll hold on with static and they'll curve around to the bottom of this, which also has varnish on it, and then you have to clean that little mess up. They're like little blisters that are fat, full of varnish, and they'll be wet in the morning, so you have to kind of keep an eye on that you don't accidentally create these blisters that you have to then clean up, let dry, and then sand out. So it's really a pain when that happens. So just try to keep that edge clean. You even want to go on the bottom a little bit. Try not to hit your work surface and get dust on your brush. And there you go. So I'm going to finish up the rest of these parts and then call it a day. I've built up a lot of work here so I can just keep my brush wet and then just do a project for an hour where I'm varnishing, and then go ahead and work on something else. So first coat of varnish of many on. That was the last piece that I had to do for today. I'll let that harden overnight or even a full day. I'm going to sand between coats. You can build on this varnish very quickly, but I found that you end up spending more time sanding a lot of varnish off that you could have just brushed up every day, and then by the time you got to the final coat, you would have been done. So I'm going to do a coat a day, a sand a day, and then see how that works, and then just keep going until I'm done. Probably 3-4 coats of this, and then I'll see where I'm at, but I'm thinking that's probably my target. Now that I've got the first coat of Pettit high build varnish on both sides, I'm going to go ahead and sand that down just lightly with 220 to knock off the peaks of the varnish, and there doesn't feel like there's many, and it might just be dust in the shop, which is pretty low, I believe. But I'll just give that a light scuff with my foam. It's forgiving enough where I won't burn through, and at this point we're flat, as flat as I can get it. So I'll be using this and then go ahead and scuff up the rest of the parts, and then I will put on coat 2. Over 2 days I'll do both sides. And I've been doing the same with the boat, where I've been putting a coat on, waiting a day, and then I sand it back, and then I always alternate the sides of the boat. I'm turning the boat up literally on end, vertical, so the varnish has a flat surface to work on and hopefully flatten out into that really deep grain and some of the dock rash that I repaired. So back to work. So when I finished up with the 220, I think I'm going to go right to 320 next time. It's so smooth. I use my 3M scratch pad to get around not only the corners, because the edges are really tender. You don't want to buzz through those and get to the stain, but also the low spots that still remain. This will allow you to get into those and get that shiny surface removed. And then I'll vacuum this, put it aside, and then just before I have my varnish party every night, I tack everything and just move through the parts, and then I move to the boat, and then I leave the building and let the varnish harden all night and come back and do it again. I just finished using a 3M Scotch-Brite pad to knock down the high points, which were very little, mostly probably little dust peaks, on the second coat of sealer that I put over the stain. I'm sorry, over the epoxy, and then went ahead and scratched that out. And now I'm ready to put my varnish on. I'll probably do 3 coats in the interior. Most of the interior has 1 already. And I wanted to do this in the floor area differently. So I ended up doing it separately. So I'm gonna go ahead and put the varnish on that. And just like the parts that are gonna go around it or on top of it, I'll sand in between the 3 coats, and then should have a beautiful flat surface and be durable. The timbers now, which probably will get a lot of foot traffic, they have epoxy sealer and then 3 coats of varnish. It should give it a pretty durable surface for hopefully just bare feet. And then I'll finish up with the gray last and then put the floorboards in, and then we'll be done and all the parts will go back. Back to work. Well, that's the first coat of the varnish, Pettit's high build varnish on the inner keel and keelsons. Really happy with how that looks. I'm going to put 2 more coats of those on with a sand in between with 220, and then we'll be ready to put down the gray paint. So the day has arrived that I can start putting the gray Pettit EZ Bilge paint on the 2 floor panels, we'll call them. One has the gas tank and one has the battery. And then these are the 2 parts that they go in first to the keel, and then these these screw down onto the blocks that are against the inner keel. And that will allow me to keep them secure. And then there's 3 fasteners that go into the 2 extra keelsons, give it a stable surface. So I'm going to start painting these, and then I will move to the bilge. The boat has the same color gray in the bilge area where a lot of people walk. So I thought I'd go with a paint that was both durable for water and oil and feet. So that's what I decided. And it had a gray in it already, so we're probably very close to what was their original. So I'm going to get at that, and I'm going to use a roller because all of these parts have been coated with 3 layers or applications of the Total Boat high performance clear epoxy. I know that they're smooth, so they're using the brush for grain on this wouldn't do any good. But I am going to tip it. They suggested on the can, always read the labels or your technical data that comes sometimes in pieces of paper. And I'm just going to lightly tip it. Not only is that helping it smooth it out, because it is a very shiny surface, meaning smooth, it doesn't, take it in very well. So you have to just kind of smooth it out. And this will get 3 coats at least of bilge paint, not only for durability, but for coverage. I didn't have to strain it. I didn't really see a need. As a brand new can, I stirred it well. I suppose if you wanted to run it through a filter, you could. And I might do that with the last batch because more than likely I'm going to have some dry paint that every time you open a can of paint or varnish, it's interacting with the air around you, so it'll start to put a film on your paint and varnish. I had that happen a lot with the varnish. Just natural. It's the solvents flashing off right in front of you. So I'm going to do the edges on this one, and then I'm going to do the other 3 pieces, and then I'll check in when I get to the boat. So for the bilge, I'm just going to quickly roll and tip and try to get this boat back closer to level so I don't have any drips. It's going on it's a thin paint, so I'm not going to put it on very thick. You can see I've already taped where the bilge touches the mahogany stained and varnished inner keel and then keelsons. So I want to make sure I keep that. And then when I get up to the front, I've taped it as well where there's no timber, but I want a nice fine line. So same thing I did over there on the parts. I'm just going to make sure my rollers got paint, but not a lot. I don't want this to drip, and the less running I have into the tape and possibly under it, the better. And I'm just going to keep that. I'm going to do a wet edge. I have to go back here real quick and do that. Being the second coat, I can probably get away with it today, but I wouldn't do that usually. And I'm just going to push down, onto the floor, but definitely not try to push it under that tape, even though I've got frog tape on there and I've got my fingernail, got it pretty tight in there. I want to make sure it has a nice crisp transition from mahogany to gray. So I will keep going. It's the next day, and I'm really happy with how both the parts and the boat came out with this first coat of Pettit's EZ Bilge paint. You can see the shine. Not only the paint, probably the surface being prepared with the epoxy really helped. So what I'll do is I'll flip these over and keep doing different sides. Also really impressed with how it came out in the bilge. It will match the boards from the back here all the way to the front. And I did notice there's a few imperfections, which you always notice with either a primer coat or with any sort of shiny surface. You can see there's a couple pieces I missed. Some of these are also grain from the wood. You can see the diagonal. That's the inner hull, just the way the boat was made. So I'm going to go through with some Total Fair fairing compound and get that fixed, and then sand it out, and then by this afternoon or tonight I'll have enough time to get that sanded and go for coat number 2. Well, the boat is back together for the most part. I've got the restored seat back in place. Really do miss having that there until you see it. Really makes the boat look good. It really matches well now, where before it was a little darker, so that I'm pleased that that came out. You can see that the floor gray bilge paint is all completed. Here's what those floor panels that I've been working so hard on look like. Those are in place. Allows the battery and the tank to sit up off the floor, and you can still see down into the bilge to see if there's water, because there's no drain plug on this boat, and the bilge pump sits in one of those half moons. And here's what the front to the seat back looks like. And then to the front, I have reinstalled not only the bow shelf up under there, but the inner keel, or keelson shifter mount. That's where the outboard motor shifter goes. You shift it with your left hand and drive with the right. The only thing I haven't put back on is the glove box. And I'm trying to source some different hinges for it before I have to try to clean up what I had. But that's done as well. And the only thing missing now, of course, is the steering wheel gauge and the electrics components, which will go in last. But otherwise, I'm real happy with the interior. Certainly an improvement from what it was. There's enough history I left under the epoxy and under the varnish so that you can see that it is an older boat. Well, that'll do it for today's episode. Thank you for tuning in. I hope you're enjoying this project as much as I am. If you are, please hit the subscribe button and you'll get notifications every 2 weeks on Tuesday morning that a new video has been uploaded. And if you're enjoying it to the point where it's entertaining and useful, then please hit the like button. It's always nice to receive positive feedback. And if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to place those in the comment section below. As we move on, the videos will move to the staining and epoxy and varnishing of the deck, and then I'll be finishing the sides. More blue paint will be going on the side. I'm doing blue paint last to cover up any varnish over, the seam. And then of course there'll be the putting in the electrical system and the final assembly and a comment or a review of how the project went and my thoughts, and we'll call this one complete. So thank you for tuning in, and I will see you in 2 weeks.